Welcome to VidZ, your home for careful consideration of our common concerns. I'm Dr. Ted Noel. This week, the United States moved its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. This move has been the law in the U.S. for decades, but several presidents declined to act. Donald Trump made it a campaign promise and now has delivered. Predictably, the legacy media, NBC, CBS, ABC, CNN, and all their drive-by cronies went nuts. And on cue, the so-called Palestinians in Gaza rioted for the cameras, which drove the mainstream media even crazier. Let's consider the supposed rationale for the protests. If you read the left-wing stories, the Palestinians are protesting to get the right of return recognized as valid. This theory is that they were lawful citizens of what is now Israel and were displaced from their homeland. Israel is an occupying force. All of the major groups allied against Israel refuse to recognize Israel as anything other than the Zionist entity. Israel is not a valid country in their eyes. This is pure Barbra Streisand. If you study the history of the Levant, that's the region where Israel is located, you'll find that until about 1500 BC it was occupied by scattered bands of nomads. Near Tyre, in what was now southern Lebanon, there was a Phoenician city, and the infamous Queen Jezebel was from those roots. To the south, in what is now Gaza, lived the Philistines. When the Israelites entered the regions, they displaced the few people who lived there, with the major exception of the Philistines. Since the 6th century BC, the area now called Israel has been governed by constantly changing powers. And it wasn't until after World War I that it started to have a stable and growing population. This was because it became a Jewish homeland under the Palestinian Mandate. In 1948, the Jewish state was declared, and it was immediately attacked by its Muslim neighbors. But it survived. It lost the West Bank in that 1949 war, but recovered it in 1968. In short, you can argue almost anything about who should own Israel and would have some sort of hypothetical basis. But no living so-called Palestinians have any roots in Israel other than the ones who have descended from the Arabs who lived with the Israelis peacefully since 1923, when the Palestinian Mandate was declared. All of the rest are descended from citizens of the other neighboring countries. Thus, they are Syrians, Jordanians, or Egyptians, not Palestinians. The right of return is a fiction. We should also note that every country on earth has developed through various conquests and migrations, so it's possible to create a right of return for everyone, even though they don't know their roots. But I don't have a right of return to Holland, even though I can trace my family tree there. And the so-called Palestinians don't have such a right either. But don't tell the drive-by media that. So we have a group of people who are unwilling to live at peace with their neighbors. Israel doesn't attack them, but they throw rockets at Israel. Any self-respecting country would take only so much of that and then completely conquer Gaza, instituting martial law for an extended period. Only when resistance is completely quashed would some sort of home rule be allowed. But instead, Israel acts with great restraint. After all, under all past U.S. presidents, their status as a U.S. ally would have been at risk. But note that Israel has even planned to spend $5 billion to build an artificial port for Gaza. But now, with a great supporter of Israel in the White House, Israel continues to act with great restraint. Let's look at the proof. There is a fence between Gaza and Israel. Most of it is just a tall chain-link fence like you see around a lot of public schools. There are soldiers guarding it so that if it's pushed over, they can contain the breakthrough. but the Palestinians slung firebombs at the soldiers. Molotov cocktails were used to try to burn portions of the fence. And the Israelis responded with tear gas. So since the Palestinians are really peaceful, they backed off. Not. After all, these are the same people who used knives to murder Jewish farmers and celebrated the murders. And they set fire to the pipeline that supplies Gaza with gas. What did the mainstream media do? They celebrated people claiming that the Israelis were terrorists. But curiously, some evidence has crept out. When the Palestinians couldn't break through, they burned tires to create black smoke so the Israeli soldiers couldn't see them and attacked again. To preserve the fence, ultimately the Israelis fired on the Palestinians. So the claim was that over 50 Palestinians were killed and hundreds wounded. But the hospitals were empty. Then they marched with dead babies in their arms as if the Israelis were baby killers. But we didn't see any babies at the riot. How were they killed? Or were any killed? We never saw dead babies, just baby-sized somethings wrapped in sheets. And what about the mass of dead adults? That we now know that some of them were, drumroll please, members of the Hamas security services. A Hamas representative claims 50 Hamas security services people were killed. These were paid terrorists, and they paid the price. But what about all those dead bodies under sheets? Did I just see one of those dead people move? Let's look a bit longer. Another one just moved. How is it that a dead person can move? Does his nose itch? Oh my goodness, this dead person just sat up. No, the video you just looked at is not made up. It was taken by someone who was in the hall where the supposedly dead bodies were on display. But it seems that it was taken during the preparation for a big news shoot. Once the news cameras were turned on, all those bodies would look dead and the mourners would turn on the tears. Who knows, there might even be a couple of dead ones there. But the few that got shot while attacking the Israelis wouldn't be enough for a good story. So they took a bunch of live guys and covered them with sheets to make the picture look good. And our Western media bought it. Let's see. We know the Palestinians are liars. We know that the mainstream media are liars. So when the media gets pictures that fit their preferred story, they won't look any further. But we know the truth. There might be 50 dead, but there aren't hundreds of wounded. The hospitals weren't crowded. We know that some died, and it looks like they were paid terrorists. Good riddance. And we have irrefutable evidence that the story was made up. The mainstream media are not our friends. They hate Israel and will do anything to destroy the Jewish state. What they should want that. Why they should want that isn't clear, but we know absolutely that they're simply a propaganda machine. Stay careful, my friends. There be dragons out there. Please support VidZet on Facebook, on Patreon, and follow VidZet on Twitter. Until next time, thanks for watching. I'm Dr. Ted Noel.